In a small Missouri town, a picture-perfect society wedding shatters in seconds when 6-year-old Liam points at the groom and screams words that freeze the blood of everyone present. "Mommy, it's him. It's the man from the night you cried." The church falls silent. The bride drops her bouquet, and Abby Harrison, a struggling single mother, watches as her carefully guarded secret explodes before 200 witnesses. What could a child possibly remember from when he was barely a year old? Why does the powerful Mark Donovan turn pale at the sight of a woman he shouldn't even recognize? And what dark family legacy connects them? A legacy of wealth, power, and silenced women that spans generations. As buried truths claw their way to the surface, both families will be forced to confront the devastating question: how far would you go to protect your name, your future, or your child? Follow this channel for a story that will break your heart and rebuild it in ways you never expected. Like and comment with your thoughts and where you're watching from, as we uncover the truth behind the child's innocent revelation. The golden June sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Augustine's Church, casting rainbow patterns across the white marble floor. Outside, the manicured lawns of Millbrook, Missouri sparkled with morning dew, and the town's flag fluttered gently against the cloudless blue sky. This was supposed to be the perfect day, the wedding of the year in a town where everybody knew everybody's business, or at least thought they did. Abigail "Abby" Harrison sat stiffly in the second-to-last pew, her fingers nervously adjusting the collar of her thrift store dress, the nicest one she owned, but still worlds away from the designer outfits adorning most guests. At 28, she looked older, her once bright eyes now perpetually shadowed by exhaustion, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. A small boy fidgeted beside her, his bow tie already crooked despite her best efforts. "Mummy, is it starting soon?" 6-year-old Liam whispered, loud enough to draw glances from the row ahead. Abby gently squeezed his hand. "Shh, honey, just a little longer." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the calm she was trying to project. She shouldn't even be here. The cream-colored invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, addressed in elegant calligraphy. Her half-sister, Cassidy, daughter of her father's second wife, was marrying Mark Donovan, heir to the Donovan media empire. Abby had almost thrown the invitation away. After all, they'd barely spoken in years, and she doubted Cassidy had sent it for any reason beyond keeping up appearances. But Liam had found it. A real princess wedding? He'd asked, eyes wide with wonder, and somehow she couldn't bear to disappoint him. One magical day for her son seemed worth the discomfort. The church was a sea of expensive perfume and whispered gossip. From her position near the back, Abby could see the bride's side filled with St. Louis socialites, while the grooms showcased politicians, celebrities, and old money families who'd flown in from both coasts. She recognized several faces from national magazines, people whose world she had once briefly touched, before being firmly pushed back to where she belonged. The organ music shifted, signaling the entrance of the groom and his groomsmen. A collective rustle passed through the church as everyone turned to watch. Mark Donovan appeared in the doorway to the right of the altar, tall and commanding in his tailored tuxedo. At 34, he had the polished good looks that came from generations of privilege. Strong jaw, confident posture, and that easy smile that had graced countless charity galas and business magazines. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and a custom platinum watch glinted at his wrist, alongside a black cord bracelet bearing the golden Donovan family crest. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the bridal party," the pastor announced. Abby stood, lifting Liam so he could see over the heads in front of them. The boy had been surprisingly quiet throughout the preliminary music, content to draw on the program with the small crayons she'd brought. Now his attention seemed captured by the procession. As the bridesmaids entered in their flowing sage-green dresses, Abby felt a strange heaviness in her chest. The familiarity of the church, the music, the ritualistic words, they all transported her to another time before Liam, before everything changed. She glanced at Mark, standing proud at the altar. He hadn't noticed her yet. Why would he? She was nobody in this crowd. Just a single mom who worked 2 jobs to afford a 1-bedroom apartment in the part of town these people never visited. Just a footnote in the grand Donovan-Marshall merger of families. And then something strange happened. Liam, who had been quiet in her arms, suddenly stiffened. His small body went rigid as his gaze locked onto the altar. Abby felt him inhale sharply. "Liam, what's—" But before she could finish, her son lurched forward in her arms, pointing a small finger directly at Mark Donovan. His voice, high and clear, cut through the orchestral music like a knife. "Mommy, it's him. It's the man from the night you cried." The words echoed in the perfect acoustics of the church. The music stuttered to a discordant halt. 200 heads turned in unison, eyes searching for the source of the interruption. Liam continued, his voice growing louder in the sudden silence. "The man with the black thing on his arm from when you were on the floor." Abby froze, her blood turning to ice. How could he possibly remember? He'd been barely a year old. At the altar, Mark Donovan's face drained of all color. His confident smile vanished as his eyes finally found Abby in the crowd. For a moment that stretched into eternity, their gazes locked. Hers wide with panic, his with shock and something else. Recognition. The bride appeared in the doorway, a vision in white lace, her expression confused as she tried to understand the commotion. The perfect bouquet of white roses and baby's breath trembled in her hands before slipping through her fingers, scattering across the marble floor like drops of snow. In the front row, Eleanor Donovan, Mark's mother, swayed on her feet, her hand clutching at her pearl necklace before she collapsed into her husband's arms, the thud of her fall echoing through the stunned church. The pastor cleared his throat, desperately trying to regain control. "Please, let's continue with—" But it was too late. The perfect wedding was fracturing before their eyes. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Cell phones emerged from purses and pockets, already recording. Abby couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The secret she'd buried for 6 years, the shame, the pain, the silent dignity she'd maintained while raising her son alone, all of it threatened to explode in this sacred space, in front of everyone who had ever judged her. And still, Mark stared at her, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Was it guilt, fear, or something more complex? A recognition of something neither of them had ever acknowledged, even to themselves. As if moving through molasses, Abby finally regained control of her limbs. She clutched Liam to her chest and turned, pushing past the shocked onlookers, desperate to escape before the whispers became accusations, before questions could be asked. Behind her, she heard Cassidy's voice, high and shrill. "What's happening, Mark, Mark?" But Mark remained frozen at the altar, watching as Abby fled with her son, their son, in her arms, the truth hanging in the air between them like an invisible, unbreakable chain. The heavy church doors slammed behind her, the sound like a judge's gavel coming down on all their lives. And inside, the perfect white veil that had taken months to select fluttered to the ground, landing in a pool of silk and lies. The church erupted into chaos the moment the heavy oak doors slammed behind Abby. Like a disturbed anthill, guests rose from pews, phones recording, voices rising in a crescendo of shock and speculation. Through the stained glass windows, Abby could hear the commotion as she rushed down the stone steps. Liam clutched tightly against her chest. "Mommy, why are we running? Did I say something bad?" Liam's voice quivered, his small fingers gripping the collar of her dress. Tears welled in his innocent eyes, reflecting confusion that twisted Abby's heart. "No, baby, you didn't," she whispered, fumbling with her car keys. Her hands trembled so violently, she dropped them twice on the gravel parking lot. We need to go home now." Behind them, the church doors burst open. A stream of guests poured out, phones raised like torches in a witch hunt. Abby didn't look back as she finally managed to unlock her rusted Corolla, a 12-year-old model that stood out painfully among the sea of luxury vehicles. As she buckled Liam into his booster seat, she caught a glimpse of Mark in the church doorway. Even from this distance, she could see the pallor of his face, the rigid tension in his shoulders as his best man gripped his arm, speaking urgently into his ear. But Mark wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on Abby, carrying the weight of 6 years of unspoken history between them. Cassidy appeared beside him in her wedding gown, mascara already streaking down her perfectly made-up face. She followed Mark's gaze, her expression transforming from confusion to dawning horror as she spotted her half-sister escaping the scene. "Drive," Abby whispered to herself, turning the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, before reluctantly roaring to life. "Please, just drive." The 20-minute journey back to her apartment passed in a fog. The familiar landmarks of Millbrook blurred together. The Main Street diner where she worked morning shifts. The elementary school where Liam would start first grade in the fall. The pharmacy where she sometimes had to decide between filling her anxiety prescription or buying Liam new shoes. Today, they all seemed to belong to another life, one that had just been irrevocably shattered. In the rearview mirror, Liam's reflection showed him staring out the window, unusually quiet, his small brow furrowed in concentration, as if trying to piece together a puzzle beyond his years. "Mommy," he finally said, as they pulled into the cracked concrete parking lot of Oakwood Apartments. "That man, he made you cry, I remember." Abby's breath caught in her throat. "Liam, that was a long time ago. You were just a baby." "I wasn't sleeping," he continued, his voice taking on an eerie certainty that made her skin prickle. "It was raining outside. There was thunder. You were on the floor and your shirt was torn. You cried for a long, long time." Abby's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles turned white. That night. The night she'd thought he was asleep in the other room. The night everything fell apart. "And he was there," Liam added, softer now. "The man with the black string on his wrist. He kept saying he was sorry, but you just cried more." A single tear escaped down Abby's cheek. The black cord bracelet with the gold Donovan crest. Mark had worn it since college, a symbol of family pride that never left his wrist. Even today at the altar, it had glinted beneath his platinum watch, a reminder of who he was, who he would always be. "Are we in trouble now, Mommy?" Liam's voice pulled her back to the present. His blue eyes, so like Mark's, were wide with worry. "No, sweetheart. We're not in trouble." She forced a smile. "Let's go inside. We can make some hot chocolate and watch cartoons." Their apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in with each passing minute. While Liam sat cross-legged before the ancient TV set, Abby retreated to the tiny bathroom, locking the door behind her. Only then did she allow herself to crumble, sliding down against the peeling wallpaper until she hit the cold tile floor. 6 years of careful silence. 6 years of rebuilding her life piece by painful piece. 6 years of protecting Liam from the truth about his father, a man who had looked her in the eyes and said, "This never happened," before walking away. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Unknown number. Then immediately again, and again. The texts began flooding in. Friends, acquaintances, even co-workers who'd somehow already heard. And then one from a number she'd deleted but never forgotten. "We need to talk. Please. Mark." A knock at the bathroom door made her jump. "Mommy?" Liam's voice was small. "Are you crying again?" Abby quickly wiped her tears. "No, baby. I'm just washing my face. I'll be right out." When she opened the door, Liam stood there clutching something in his small hand, a crumpled photograph she kept hidden in her nightstand drawer. In it, a younger Abby smiled beside several other waitstaff at the Donovan Estate's annual charity gala. And there in the background, Mark stood watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. "Is he my daddy?" Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ladies at school say I don't have one, but everybody has a daddy." The question hung between them, heavier than any secret Abby had ever carried. Before she could answer, her phone rang again, this time displaying Missouri Herald on the screen. The press. Already. Outside, a car door slammed. Through the thin curtains, Abby saw a familiar silver BMW parking beside her Corolla. Margot Davis, the former housekeeper for the Donovan family, stood beside it, her weathered face grim beneath her grey curls. "He's coming for you," she called out as Abby cracked the window. "And he's not alone. There are things about that night and things you don't know. Things I saw." Abby's blood ran cold. In her hand, her phone vibrated with another text from Mark. "I never told anyone, but someone else knew. And I think they've been waiting for this day." As the sun began to set over Millbrook, casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper of her apartment, Abby realized that the secret she'd kept for 6 years wasn't just hers anymore. It had always belonged to others too, people with far more power and far more to lose than a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet. And now it was blooming like flowers of blood across the perfectly manicured surface of their lives. By morning, it seemed all of America knew about the child who had pointed at the groom and brought a society wedding to its knees. Abby woke to the persistent buzz of her phone vibrating itself off her nightstand. 37 missed calls, 62 text messages, and an inbox flooded with requests from every news outlet from the Millbrook Gazette to the New York Times. "Mommy, we're on TV," Liam called from the living room, where he sat cross-legged in dinosaur pajamas, wide-eyed at the morning news. Someone had recorded the moment on their phone, Liam's small finger pointing, his clear voice carrying through the church. The video, pixelated and shaky, had over 2 million views already. Abby lunged for the remote, shutting off the television before they could show her face. "Honey, I need you to get dressed. We're going to stay with Aunt Rachel for a few days." "Because of the man at the church?" Liam asked, his innocent eyes searching her face with unnerving perception. "Just for a little vacation," she lied, already throwing essentials into an overnight bag. Her fingers trembled as she dialed her best friend's number. Rachel had been the only one who stood by her when she'd returned to Millbrook pregnant and alone 6 years ago. Outside, a small cluster of reporters had already gathered near her building's entrance. Abby peered through the blinds, her heart sinking. There was no way out without being seen. Her phone lit up with a call from a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Miss Harrison." A woman's crisp, professional voice came through. "This is Patricia Whelan from Donovan Media Legal Department. Mr. Donovan Sr. requests your presence at the family office to discuss recent events. A car has been dispatched to your residence." Abby's laugh was hollow. "You think I'm going anywhere near that family right now?" "Ms. Harrison," the voice hardened, "this isn't a request we expect you to decline. There are sensitive matters to discuss, matters that would be better addressed privately than through the press." A threat, thinly veiled. Before Abby could respond, the line went dead. Her phone immediately pinged with a text from Mark's number. "Don't go with them. My father's damage control team will bury this, and you with it. I'm trying to fix this. Fix this." As if what happened between them was a broken appliance, something that could be repaired with the right tools and enough money. As if he hadn't walked away when she told him she was pregnant, his exact words burning into her memory. "This can't be happening. Not to me. Not now." A sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to her building, scattering the waiting reporters like pigeons. Two broad-shouldered men in dark suits emerged, their eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses despite the cloudy day. Abby backed away from the window, her mind racing. The fire escape. It was their only chance. "Liam, honey, we're going to play a game," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Remember how Spider-Man sometimes has to escape from the bad guys using special routes?" "Are there bad guys, Mommy?" Liam asked, his voice small. Before she could answer, a sharp knock rattled her apartment door. "Miss Harrison, please open the door." "5 minutes," she called out, grabbing Liam's hand and their hastily packed bag. "I need to get dressed." The fire escape creaked ominously under their weight as they descended to the alley behind the building. Abby's heart pounded so loudly she was certain the men would hear it through the walls. At the bottom, Rachel waited in her battered Honda Civic, engine running. "Jesus, Abby," Rachel whispered as they scrambled into the back seat. "What the hell is going on? The video's everywhere. People are saying, 'Just drive.'" Abby cut her off, ducking down as they passed the front of the building where the Donovan security team was now engaged in a heated exchange with the reporters. As they merged onto the highway heading out of Millbrook, Liam pressed his face against the window, watching his hometown recede in the distance. "Are we running away from my daddy?" he asked suddenly. The question hung in the air like shattered glass. Rachel's eyes met Abby's in the rearview mirror, wide with shock. "Liam, honey," Abby began, unsure how to answer. "Because the man on TV said that's who he is," Liam continued matter-of-factly. "They said the little boy, that's me, recognized his secret daddy at the wedding." Rachel cursed under her breath, switching off the radio that had been playing softly in the background. Undoubtedly another news update about the scandal. 30 miles outside of town, they stopped at a roadside diner. While Liam colored placemats with crayons provided by a sympathetic waitress, Abby's phone buzzed with a message from Margot, the former Donovan housekeeper. "Meet me tonight. Lakeside Motel, room 17. Come alone. What I have to tell you can't wait." A chill ran through Abby's body. The last time she had seen Margot was that night 6 years ago, when the older woman had found her in the servants' bathroom of the Donovan estate, sobbing, her uniform torn. Margot had helped her clean up, driven her home, and made her promise never to speak of what happened. 2 weeks later, Margot had been dismissed from her 20-year position with the family for unspecified violations of confidentiality. The television mounted in the corner of the diner suddenly caught Abby's attention. Mark Donovan stood before a sea of microphones on the steps of his family's media headquarters, his expression grave. "I want to address the speculation surrounding yesterday's events," he said, his voice steady despite the dark circles under his eyes. "The wedding has been postponed while my fiancé and I work through some personal matters. I ask for privacy during this difficult time." A reporter shouted from the crowd, "Is the child yours, Mr. Donovan?" Mark's face remained impassive, but Abby could see the muscle twitching in his jaw, the tell he had whenever he was holding back anger. "I have no further comment at this time." As security ushered him toward a waiting car, his eyes seemed to look directly into the camera, directly at Abby, with an unspoken message she couldn't decipher. "He didn't deny it," Rachel whispered, sliding back into the booth. "Why wouldn't he just deny it if it wasn't true?" Abby's phone lit up again. A text from Cassidy, her half-sister, the abandoned bride. "You ruined my life. I hope it was worth it." Attached was a photograph Abby had never seen before, herself at 22, laughing beside Mark at some event, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. In the background, clearly visible, was their father, watching the interaction with an expression of calculated interest. "Oh God," Abby whispered, suddenly nauseated. How long had they known? How long had her own family been watching, waiting for this time bomb to detonate? As they paid the bill and headed back to the car, Liam tugged at her hand. "Mommy, if that man is my daddy, why doesn't he live with us? Doesn't he love us?" The simplicity of the question brought tears to Abby's eyes. 6 years of careful omissions and gentle lies crumbling before a child's innocent logic. "It's complicated, baby," she managed, helping him into his booster seat. "Is it because of the night you cried, when he said he was sorry but couldn't stay?" Abby froze, her blood turning to ice. "What else do you remember, Liam?" The child's eyes, so like Mark's, gazed at her with unsettling clarity. "I remember a lady watching from the door, the one who called yesterday. She saw everything, but she pretended not to. Margot, the housekeeper who had helped her that night, who had witnessed something even Abby didn't know about." As Rachel pulled back onto the highway, Abby made a decision. Tonight, she would meet Margot. It was time to uncover what really happened that night, not just what Mark had done, but what others had allowed to happen. Behind them, unnoticed, a black SUV with tinted windows merged into traffic, maintaining a careful distance as they drove toward the unknown. The lakeside motel had seen better days. Paint peeled from the wooden doors of its 12 units, and the neon vacancy sign flickered erratically in the gathering dusk. Room 17 was at the far end, partially obscured by overgrown bushes. A deliberate choice, Abby suspected, for someone who didn't want to be seen. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked, eyeing the motel warily from behind the steering wheel. They had left Liam with Rachel's mother, telling him they needed to run a grown-up errand. "This whole thing feels dangerous." Abby stared at the weathered door of room 17, her stomach knotting. "I need answers, Rach. I've been living with half-truths for 6 years. "And what if you don't like what you hear?" Rachel's voice softened. "What if it's worse than not knowing?" The question hung between them like smoke. Abby gathered her courage and opened the car door. "I'll call you when I'm done. If you don't hear from me in an hour, I'll be right here," Rachel finished, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The whole time, the gravel crunched under Abby's feet as she approached room 17. Before she could knock, the door opened a crack, revealing Margot's weathered face. The former housekeeper had aged considerably in the 6 years since Abby had last seen her. Deep lines bracketed her mouth, and her once auburn hair had gone completely silver. "You weren't followed?" Margot asked, peering past Abby into the darkening parking lot. "I don't think so." But even as she said it, Abby thought of the black SUV that had seemed to appear in Rachel's rearview mirror at every turn. Margot ushered her in quickly, securing 3 separate locks on the door. The room was sparse but clean, with stacks of file folders and newspaper clippings arranged meticulously on the bed. A wall beside the bathroom displayed what looked like a detective's investigation board, photos connected with red string, handwritten notes, and printed documents. "You've been researching?" Abby asked, her throat suddenly dry. "Watching, waiting." Margot's voice had the rough edge of a lifetime smoker. "For 6 years I've been gathering evidence, proof of what that family has been doing, what they've been hiding." "What do you mean?" Abby stepped closer to the wall. Among the photos, she recognized several young women who had worked alongside her at Donovan estate events. "Is this about me and Mark?" Margot's laugh was bitter. "Oh, honey, you weren't the first. And if they have their way, you won't be the last." She pulled a thick file from the stack on the bed. "Before we get to that night, there's something you need to see. Something I found 3 weeks after I was fired." From the file she withdrew a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. I was clearing out my mother's nursing home room after she passed. She worked for the Donovans before me for 30 years. This was hidden in her Bible. Abby took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter on faded stationery, dated nearly 30 years earlier. If anything happens to me, look for the man with the black cord bracelet and the gold family crest. He knows what was done to me and what was taken. The handwriting was eerily familiar, the same looping script Abby had seen on birthday cards throughout her childhood. This is my mother's handwriting, she whispered, her voice cracking. How is that possible? Margot's eyes softened with sympathy. Your mother worked as a seasonal server for the Donovans during college, just like you did, just like a dozen other girls over the decades. The room seemed to tilt around Abby. Her mother, Catherine, had never spoken about her college jobs. She had fallen ill when Abby was 19, early onset Alzheimer's erasing her memories piece by piece until she no longer recognized her own daughter. For the past 8 years, she had resided in Millbrook Care Center, lost in a fog from which she rarely emerged. My mother, Abby struggled to form the words. Are you saying that Mark's father, not Mark's father? Margot shook her head grimly. His grandfather. The current Mr. Donovan Sr. wears his father's bracelet now, a family tradition passed from father to son along with the company and other traditions. Bile rose in Abby's throat. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the letter clutched in her hand. Why are you showing me this now? Why didn't you tell me 6 years ago? Because I didn't have proof then, just suspicions. And the Donovans are very good at making problems disappear. Margot turned to the investigation wall, pointing to a newspaper clipping. 3 young women who worked Donovan events and later filed complaints. One committed suicide. One retracted her statement and moved to Australia. The third was found with drugs in her car during a traffic stop, drugs she swore weren't hers, and served 2 years. Abby's eyes scanned the photos, newspaper articles, and notes. A pattern emerged from the scattered evidence. Young women, mostly from working-class backgrounds, who had crossed paths with the Donovan men and suffered mysterious misfortunes afterward. The black cord bracelet, Abby murmured, remembering the one Mark wore constantly, even with his wedding tuxedo. What does it mean? It's a symbol of the family's code, Margot explained, her voice hard. Loyalty above all, the family name before personal desires, and silence, absolute silence, about anything that might tarnish the Donovan legacy. A memory surfaced in Abby's mind, Mark touching the bracelet almost superstitiously before telling her they couldn't see each other anymore, that what had happened between them was a mistake that could never be acknowledged. The night at the mansion, Abby said slowly. After the charity gala, Mark followed me to the staff area. He'd been drinking. We argued about us, about why he'd been ignoring me after we'd been seeing each other secretly for months. She swallowed hard. But he didn't. He never forced himself on me. He just said cruel things, said I wasn't Donovan material, that his father would disown him. Margot's expression darkened. But someone else was there that night. Someone who saw everything. Someone who came into the bathroom after Mark left you crying. A chill ran through Abby's body. Who? Your father. Margot's voice was barely above a whisper. Richard Harrison. He had just married into the extended Donovan family through his new wife, Cassidy's mother. He was desperate to cement his position, and when he saw what was happening between you and Mark, what are you saying? Abby's voice shook. He made a deal with Daniel Donovan Sr. Your silence for his advancement in the company, a position on the board. Your father knew you were pregnant before you did. The Donovan security team had been watching you for weeks, and he made sure Mark would never acknowledge the child. The room spun around Abby, memories realigning with sickening clarity. Her father's sudden rise in the company, his insistence that she leave town for her own good, the trust fund he'd set up for Liam with the cryptic stipulation that Abby never pursue paternity. There's more, Margot said, gentler now. Your sister, Cassidy, she knows. She's always known. The marriage to Mark was arranged years ago, part of your father's deal. She was supposed to be the suitable daughter, the one who would strengthen the family connections. Abby's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. Check your email, now. With shaking hands, she pulled up her rarely used email account. A new message waited, the sender anonymous. The subject line read simply, "Insurance." She opened it to find a video file. The timestamp showed a date 6 years earlier, the night of the charity gala. The grainy security footage showed the staff parking area behind the Donovan mansion. Abby recognized herself, younger and tearful, rushing toward her car. Mark appeared, grabbing her arm. "Please don't tell anyone." His voice came through clearly on the recording. "I just wanted to see you again, but this can't happen. My father, the family." Abby watched herself pull away, her younger self's voice breaking. "I think I'm pregnant, Mark. I'm late. What am I supposed to do?" His face on the screen drained of color, exactly as it had in the church days ago. "This can't be happening. Not to me. Not now." As he walked away, another figure emerged from the shadows, Richard Harrison, Abby's father, watching the entire exchange with calculated interest. Abby closed the video, her hands trembling violently. "Who sent this?" "I did," a male voice answered from the bathroom doorway. Mark Donovan stood there, his expensive suit rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. "We need to talk, Abby, before they get to you, before they silence you like they tried to silence your mother 30 years ago." The silence in the motel room was deafening. Abby stared at Mark, her body frozen in shock while Margot reached instinctively for something in her pocket, a small canister of pepper spray. The air felt electrically charged, as if the slightest movement might trigger an explosion. "How did you find us?" Abby finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark's gaze remained steady, though exhaustion lined his face. "I've had someone watching you since the wedding. Not my father's security team, someone I trust." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, a gesture so humanizing that Abby found it jarring on a man she'd mentally transformed into a monster. "I couldn't risk them getting to you first." "And why should we trust you now?" Margot stepped forward, pepper spray visible in her grip. "After what your family has done, after what you did to Abby." Mark's eyes, the same striking blue that Liam had inherited, flicked toward Margot, then back to Abby. "Because I'm done being part of the system. Because 6 years ago I was a coward, and because," his voice caught, "because I saw my son point at me in that church, and everything changed." Something shifted in the room, the tension morphing into something more complex. Before Abby could respond, her phone rang, Rachel's ringtone. "Abby?" Rachel's voice was tight with panic. "Liam's running a fever. It spiked really fast. Mum's taking him to the emergency room. He's asking for you." The world narrowed to a pinpoint. "Which hospital?" Abby demanded, already grabbing her purse. "I'm on my way." "Millbrook General. They're the closest with a pediatric unit." Rachel paused. "Abby? He's really burning up. The doctor on call. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Abby cut her off, ending the call and turning to the door. "I'll drive you," Mark said immediately. "My car's faster, and I know the back roads." Abby hesitated, torn between her instinctive distrust and the desperate need to reach her son. "You don't have a choice," Margot interjected, gathering the files from the bed. "Your friend has the only other car, and she's at the hospital. I'll follow with these." She handed Abby a thumb drive. "Everything I've collected. Keep it safe." The drive to Millbrook was a blur of rain-slicked roads and tense silence. Mark drove with the focused intensity he brought to everything, his BMW taking curves at speeds that made Abby's stomach lurch. Occasionally, his hand would move unconsciously to the black cord bracelet on his wrist, as if drawing strength or seeking absolution from the family symbol he still wore. "I never knew," he finally said, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "About your mother. About the others. I swear to God, Abby." "But you knew about me," she countered, her voice hollow. "About us. About Liam." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I knew you were pregnant. I didn't know for certain the child was mine. My father, he planted doubts. Said you'd been seeing other men from the staff. Said you were targeting me for money." His jaw tightened. "I wanted to believe him because it was easier than standing up to him, than risking everything I'd been raised to value. And now," Abby's voice cracked, "now that you've seen him, now that you know he's yours." Mark's expression crumpled. "Now I hate myself for every day I've missed, for every moment I didn't fight for him, for you." He swallowed hard. "When he pointed at me in that church, when I heard his voice, something broke inside me, Abby, something that should have broken years ago." They pulled into the emergency room parking lot of Millbrook General Hospital, the stark fluorescent lights illuminating raindrops on the windshield like tears. As they rushed toward the entrance, Abby noticed Mark hesitate. "What is it?" he faltered. Will he want me there? Will it make things worse? For the first time, Abby saw genuine fear in Mark Donovan's eyes, not fear of scandal or of his father, but of rejection from the son he'd never acknowledged. He's 6, she said simply. He's sick and scared. Right now, he just needs help. The pediatric emergency ward was a sea of muted colors and gentle lighting, designed to calm frightened children. Rachel paced the waiting area, relief washing over her face when she spotted Abby. The relief quickly transformed to shock at the sight of Mark following close behind. "What the hell is he doing here?" she hissed as Abby approached. "Where's Liam?" Abby asked, ignoring the question. "Exam room 3. The doctor's with him now. Abby, his fever hit 104. They're talking about possible meningitis." Terror gripped Abby's heart like a vice. As she rushed toward the exam rooms, a doctor emerged from behind swinging doors, scanning the waiting area. "Family of Liam Harrison," he called, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Here." Abby stepped forward. "I'm his mother." The doctor approached, his expression grave beneath a shock of silver hair. His ID badge read, "Dr. M. Donovan, Chief of Pediatrics." Mark stopped dead beside Abby, color draining from his face. "Uncle Michael?" The doctor's eyes widened as he took in the scene before him, his nephew standing beside the mother of the child he'd just examined. Understanding dawned in his weathered face. "The boy in there," he said slowly. "He's yours, isn't he, Mark?" Before Mark could answer, the doctor's expression hardened with something like disgust. "I've treated this child 3 times in the past year. 3 times while you were what? Too busy with your engagement? Too concerned with the family name?" "Michael, please." Mark's voice was barely audible. "Is he okay?" The doctor's professional demeanor reasserted itself, though his eyes remained cold. "He has a severe case of strep that's developed into scarlet fever. We've started him on antibiotics, but he's dehydrated and his throat is extremely inflamed. He'll need to stay overnight, possibly longer." Abby swayed on her feet, relief and fear warring within her. "Can I see him?" "Of course." Dr. Donovan turned to lead her back, then paused, glancing at Mark. "And you? Are you coming?" Mark looked to Abby, deferring to her decision. In that moment, he seemed nothing like the confident heir to a media empire, but rather a man balanced on the knife's edge of redemption or damnation. Abby nodded once, a terse permission. Liam lay small and fragile against the white hospital sheets, his normally rosy cheeks flushed with fever, his breathing labored. An IV delivered fluids to his thin arm, and a nurse adjusted monitors displaying his vital signs. When he saw Abby, his eyes lit up despite his obvious discomfort. "Mommy," he rasped, his voice painful to hear. "I'm here, baby." Abby rushed to his bedside, gently brushing damp hair from his forehead. "I'm right here." Liam's gaze drifted past her to where Mark stood awkwardly in the doorway. Recognition flickered in the child's fever-bright eyes. "You're the man from the church," he whispered. "The man from when Mommy cried." Mark stepped forward hesitantly. "Yes," he admitted, his voice thick. "I am." "Are you a doctor too?" Liam asked, eyeing the stethoscope Dr. Michael Donovan had left draped around his neck. A strange expression crossed Mark's face, regret mingled with something like wonder. "No," he said softly, "but I wanted to be once, a long time ago." "Before you became a businessman," Liam stated matter-of-factly, surprising both adults. "How did you know that?" Mark asked. "Your pictures in Mommy's Bible. The newspaper called you a media mogul." Liam pronounced the words carefully, pride in his vocabulary momentarily overriding his discomfort. "That means you're rich and important." Mark glanced at Abby, who looked away, embarrassed at the revelation that she'd kept his press clippings. He turned back to Liam, kneeling beside the bed so they were eye to eye. "Being rich doesn't make you important," he said quietly. "Helping people when they need you, that's what matters. I forgot that for a long time." As the night deepened, Liam drifted into an uneasy sleep, the antibiotics slowly bringing his fever down. Abby maintained her vigil by his bedside, while Mark stepped out to speak with his uncle. Through the glass window of the hospital room, she watched their intense conversation, saw the older doctor's accusatory gestures and Mark's shame-faced responses. Whatever was said, Mark returned looking both shaken and strangely resolute. "My uncle says he'll be okay by morning," he told her, hovering in the doorway, as if uncertain of his right to enter. "The antibiotics are already working." Abby nodded, exhaustion making her vision blur. "Thank you for the ride, for being here." Mark stepped closer, his voice low to avoid waking Liam. "There's something else you should know. My uncle confirmed it." He took a deep breath. "You weren't the only one, Abby. There were others, young women who worked for my family. Some got money, some disappeared, and some," he hesitated, "some had children. Children my father made sure were never connected to the Donovan name." The implications settled over Abby like a shroud. How many? Enough that my uncle has suspected for years. Enough that he's been quietly running DNA comparisons whenever a child with certain familiar traits comes through his hospital. Mark's voice broke. "Liam isn't the only one, Abby. He's just the first one brave enough to speak the truth aloud." Dawn broke over Millbrook in streaks of pale gold, filtering through the vertical blinds of Liam's hospital room. Abby awoke with a start, her neck stiff from hours spent dozing in the uncomfortable visitor's chair. Across the room, Mark sat slumped against the wall, his designer suit wrinkled beyond salvation, his 5 o'clock shadow now a full beard. Despite everything, something tugged at Abby's heart at the sight of father and son asleep in the same room for the first time. Liam's fever had broken around 3 in the morning. His breathing was easier now, his small chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of healing sleep. The antibiotics had done their work, pulling him back from the brink that had terrified Abby just hours before. Her phone vibrated softly on the side table. The screen displayed a news alert. "Millbrook Patriarch Richard Harrison found dead." The headline swam before Abby's eyes. Her father, the man who had traded her silence for corporate advancement, who had arranged his stepdaughter's marriage to cover up his own complicity, was dead. The article cited apparent natural causes following a short illness, but something cold slithered through Abby's veins as she read the sterile news copy. Mark stirred across the room, immediately alert in the way of someone accustomed to crisis. He registered the expression on Abby's face and was beside her in an instant. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. Wordlessly, she handed him the phone. His eyes scanned the article, narrowing slightly at certain phrases. "Unexpected passing. Private memorial service. In lieu of flowers. Donations to the Donovan Foundation." "He wasn't ill," Abby said, her voice unnaturally calm. "I spoke to Cassidy's mother last month. She said he was training for a marathon." Mark's jaw tightened. "This is my father, covering tracks, creating a clean narrative." He handed the phone back to her. "It's what he does, what he's always done." Before Abby could respond, a nurse entered with Liam's morning medication. The woman's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Mark Donovan in her patient's room, but professional discretion kept her from commenting. As she checked Liam's vitals, the boy stirred, blinking up at the unfamiliar ceiling before his gaze found Abby. "Mommy?" His voice was stronger, though still raspy from the infection. "Can we go home now?" Abby moved to his side, relief washing through her at the clarity in his eyes. "Soon, baby. The doctor needs to check you first." Liam's attention shifted to Mark, who stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed. "You stayed," he said simply, neither question nor accusation in his tone. Mark nodded, something vulnerable crossing his face. "I did." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Dr. Michael Donovan entered, looking grave despite the good news about Liam's condition. "Abby," he said quietly, "there's someone here to see you from your father's law firm about his will." The attorney waited in a small consultation room off the main lobby, a leather portfolio open before him. Harold Winters had been her father's lawyer for decades, his silver hair and perpetual bow tie as familiar to Abby as her own reflection. Today, however, he looked different, nervous, his customary confidence replaced by an edge of unease. "Abigail," he began, using her full name as he always had, even when she was a child. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Your father's passing was unexpected." Abby sat stiffly across from him, Mark a solid presence beside her. "What happened, Harold?" "The truth." The attorney's eyes flicked briefly to Mark, then back to Abby. "Heart attack, officially. Very sudden. He was at the Donovan estate when it happened, discussing recent events." The implication hung in the air between them. Abby's father had died while negotiating some resolution to the scandal his grandson had unwittingly unleashed. "I've been instructed to inform you of certain provisions in your father's will," Harold continued, removing an envelope sealed with wax. "This was updated just 3 months ago with specific instructions that it be delivered to you immediately upon his death." The envelope felt unnaturally heavy in Abby's hands. She broke the seal and withdrew a single sheet of thick stationery, her father's bold handwriting instantly recognizable. Abigail, if you're reading this, I am gone, likely sooner than expected. There are forces at work that even I, with all my careful planning, could not fully control. The Donovans are not what they seem, and I played a dangerous game thinking I could beat them at it. I've left specific instructions with Harold regarding your inheritance. Half of my estate, approximately $12 million, has been placed in an irrevocable trust for LH. The initials are intentional. Only you will understand their significance. The trust comes with a sealed codicil that can only be opened under specific circumstances. If the truth should ever come to light, let this serve as restitution for my part in hiding it. I failed you, Abigail. I failed your mother before you. The pattern stops here. Dad Abby's hands trembled as she passed the letter to Mark, whose face darkened as he read. There's more, Harold said, removing a thicker document from his portfolio. The sealed codicil your father mentioned. It cannot be opened unless... He hesitated. Unless what? Abby pressed. Unless a specific condition is met, the attorney said carefully. A DNA test confirming paternity between Mark Donovan and Liam Harrison, filed publicly with the court. Mark inhaled sharply beside her. My father would never allow that. Harold's expression grew pained. That's the point, I believe. Your father, Mr. Donovan, has been named executor of Richard Harrison's estate. He has 30 days to contest the will before these provisions become binding. The implications washed over Abby like ice water. Her father's final move in whatever game he'd been playing with the Donovans, forcing a public acknowledgement of Liam's paternity, or losing control of millions that should, by all rights, belong to the Donovan empire. As they left the consultation room, Abby's phone rang. Rachel, who had returned to the motel to check on Margot. Abby, her friend's voice was tight with panic. The motel room was ransacked. All of Margot's files are gone. And there's blood, Abby. Not a lot, but enough that I called the police. They're searching for her now. The hospital corridor seemed to tilt beneath Abby's feet. Only Mark's steady hand at her elbow kept her upright. The thumb drive, she whispered, reaching for her purse. She gave me a copy of everything. But as her fingers searched the familiar compartments of her bag, a cold realization dawned. The drive was gone. They were here, she breathed, fear clawing at her throat. While we were with Liam, they went through my things. Mark's expression hardened, his hand moving unconsciously to the black cord bracelet on his wrist. With a sudden, decisive motion, he ripped it off, the fine threads snapping under the force of his grip. This ends now, he said, dropping the family symbol into a nearby trash can. My father has gone too far. As they hurried back to Liam's room, a nurse stopped them in the corridor, her expression concerned. Mrs. Harrison, there was a woman looking for you and your son earlier. She said she was his grandmother, but something felt off. When I asked for ID, she left suddenly. Ice formed in Abby's veins. What did she look like? Elegant. Expensive clothes, pearl necklace. Said her name was Eleanor Donovan. Mark's face went ashen. My mother. She's never even seen Liam before. She wouldn't know him if... He broke off, realization dawning. She's not here for Liam. She's here to make sure he never takes the DNA test. They ran the remaining distance to Liam's room, bursting through the door to find Dr. Michael Donovan standing protectively beside the boy's bed, his expression thunderous. She was here, he confirmed grimly. Tried to tell me she was authorized to transfer Liam to a private facility. When I refused, she mentioned how unfortunate it would be if my medical license came under review. Liam looked up from the tablet he'd been given to play with, confusion in his blue eyes. Mark's eyes. Is that lady really my grandma? He asked innocently. She didn't smile like grandmas in books. Abby gathered him close, her heart hammering against her ribs. No, baby, she's not your grandma. Then why did she have my daddy's bracelet? Liam asked, pointing to his own wrist. The black one with the gold thing. She was wearing it too. Mark and Abby exchanged looks of dawning horror. The black cord bracelet wasn't just a personal token. It was a symbol of something larger, something that had been happening in the Donovan family for generations. And somehow Liam had recognized it from a night 6 years ago that he shouldn't possibly remember. A night when Mark had come to Abby's apartment, torn between duty and desire, wearing that same bracelet as he told her goodbye. A night when someone else had been watching, someone who now wanted to ensure their role in the dark legacy of the Donovan family, remained buried forever. The safe house was a modest cabin on the outskirts of Lake Taneycomo, 3 hours from Millbrook and off any digital maps. It belonged to Dr. Michael Donovan, a retreat he'd purchased under an alias years ago, anticipating a day when he might need to escape the long reach of his brother's influence. The wooden structure sat nestled among towering pines, its existence known only to those the doctor trusted implicitly. "You'll be safe here," he assured Abby as he helped Liam from the car. The boy was still weak from his illness, but the sparkle had returned to his eyes as he gazed at the forest surrounding them. "The property is registered to a shell corporation. Not even Daniel knows about it." Mark emerged from the second vehicle, his expression tense as he scanned the perimeter. He'd barely spoken during the drive, his mind visibly working through possibilities, strategies, contingencies. In the span of 3 days, his entire life had unraveled, his engagement destroyed, his family legacy revealed as something sinister, his carefully constructed future replaced by uncertainty. "How long can we stay?" Abby asked, adjusting the small bag of belongings they'd hastily packed at the hospital. "As long as needed," Michael replied, his weathered face softening as he watched Liam tentatively exploring the porch. "At least until we figure out our next move." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a well-stocked kitchen. The isolation that had once made it perfect for weekend fishing retreats now served a more urgent purpose: protection. As night fell, Liam drifted to sleep in one of the bedrooms, exhausted from the journey and his lingering illness. The adults gathered around the wooden dining table, their faces illuminated by a single lamp, their voices hushed to avoid disturbing the child. "Margot's still missing," Rachel reported via the secure line Michael had established. "Police are treating it as a possible kidnapping, but they're moving slowly. The Donovan name carries weight, even with law enforcement." "And my father?" Mark asked, his voice tight. "Publicly, he's devastated by Richard Harrison's passing. Privately, he's rallying the company's legal team. There's talk of contesting the will on grounds of mental incompetence." Mark's laugh was bitter. Richard Harrison was many things, but mentally incompetent wasn't one of them. This was his chess move, his way of forcing the truth into the light even after he was gone. "But why?" Abby's voice broke the heavy silence that followed. "Why would my father suddenly grow a conscience after 6 years, after arranging for his own stepdaughter to marry the father of his grandchild?" Michael sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Because Richard found out he was dying. Terminal pancreatic cancer. He had maybe 3 months. The revelation settled over the room like a shroud." Abby felt a complex surge of emotions: grief for the father she'd once loved, anger at his years of manipulation, and a hollow ache for what might have been if he'd chosen differently. "He knew Daniel would make his death look natural," Michael continued. "That's why he updated his will, why he created the trust for Liam. He was laying groundwork for a truth he wouldn't live to tell." Mark stood abruptly, pacing the small confines of the cabin. "This is insane. All of it. My father, your father, this conspiracy spanning decades, and for what? To protect the precious Donovan name, to maintain some twisted legacy." A soft knock at the door silenced them all. Michael moved cautiously to the window, peering through the curtains before exhaling sharply. He opened the door to reveal a bedraggled Margot Davis, a bandage visible beneath her silver hair, her clothes mud-stained but her eyes alert. "They didn't find everything," she announced without preamble, reaching into her coat to withdraw a small USB drive, identical to the one that had disappeared from Abby's purse. "I keep backups, always have." Relief washed over Abby as she embraced the older woman. "We thought you were dead?" Margot's laugh was harsh. "They tried. Wasn't the first time someone from that family came after me. Won't be the last." She nodded toward a laptop on the counter. "But this time, I'm ready. And so is this." The drive contained everything Margot had collected over decades: financial records, security footage, medical reports spanning back to the 1970s. But most damning was a video file labeled simply "Proof." "I've been saving this," Margot explained as she connected the drive, waiting for the right moment, for someone brave enough to use it. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Security camera video from the Donovan Estate service entrance on the night of the charity gala 6 years earlier. It showed Abby leaving in tears, Mark following her into the parking area. Their confrontation played out in silence, the camera's angle capturing their expressions but not their words. What none of them had known was what happened after Mark walked away, after Abby collapsed against her car in tears. The camera caught a new figure approaching. Richard Harrison, Abby's father, his expression calculating as he watched his daughter's distress. Then, moments later, Daniel Donovan Sr. joined him, the two men conferring in what appeared to be a heated exchange. As they watched, Daniel reached into his pocket, removing what looked like a checkbook. He wrote something, tore out the check, and handed it to Richard, who stared at it for a long moment before nodding once, decisively. "The deal," Abby whispered, nausea rising in her throat. "The moment he sold me out, sold Liam out." But the video wasn't finished. As Richard pocketed the check and turned to leave, a third figure appeared in the frame, Eleanor Donovan, Mark's mother, her elegant silhouette unmistakable even in the poor lighting. She approached the men, her body language radiating fury. Words were exchanged, angry ones, judging by the gestures, before Eleanor slapped Richard Harrison hard across the face. "What is she saying?" Mark leaned closer to the screen as if proximity might suddenly provide audio. "Why is she there?" Margot's expression was grim. "I was watching from the kitchen window. I couldn't hear everything, but I remember Eleanor shouting about another one, and just like Catherine." Abby's blood ran cold. "Catherine, my mother's name." "There's more," Margot said quietly, fast-forwarding through the footage. 2 days later, the service entrance again. This time the camera showed Eleanor Donovan alone, waiting in the shadows. When Abby appeared for her shift, Eleanor intercepted her, pressing something into her hand before walking quickly away. The camera angle shifted, zooming in to capture Abby opening her palm to reveal a small key. "The key to my apartment," Abby breathed, the memory surfacing with painful clarity. "I thought I'd lost mine and had to use the spare, but it wasn't my key at all. It was different." Mark's face had gone ashen. "She let me into your apartment that night. My mother gave me access. She wanted me to see you again. To..." His voice trailed off as the implications dawned. "To what? Reconcile? Acknowledge the child? To break the pattern," Michael said quietly. Eleanor was the only one who ever stood up to Daniel, the only one who refused to participate in the family's arrangements. The final clip showed Mark arriving at Abby's apartment building, hesitating at the entrance before using a key to gain access. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., the night Liam now remembered, the night Abby had cried on the floor. "I came to tell you I was engaged," Mark said, his voice hollow with remembrance. "To Cassidy, the merger of families my father had been orchestrating for years. I came to cut ties completely." Abby nodded, the pain of that night still raw despite the years between. "You said it was better this way, cleaner, that I should take the money and start over somewhere else. And you refused," Mark continued, the self-loathing evident in his tone. "You told me I was becoming exactly what my father wanted, a man who could be bought and sold, whose loyalty had a price tag." "I slapped you," Abby admitted, her cheeks burning with the memory. "You grabbed my wrist to stop me from doing it again, and my shirt tore. And then I left," Mark finished, unable to meet her eyes. "Like the coward I was, like the Donovan I'd been raised to be." Liam's small voice cut through the heavy silence. "You said you were sorry, but you still left." They all turned to find the boy standing in the bedroom doorway, his pajamas rumpled from sleep, his blue eyes, Mark's eyes, wide and knowing. "You remember that?" Mark asked, his voice barely audible. Liam nodded solemnly. "I remember the sound of Mommy crying on the floor, and the smell of your coat when you tried to help her up. It smelled like Christmas trees. Pine," Abby realized. "Your cologne, the one from France." Mark stared at his son in wonder and dismay. "How can you possibly remember that? You were barely a year old." "Traumatic imprinting," Michael offered quietly. "Sometimes very young children retain fragments of emotionally charged events, not as conventional memories, but as sensory impressions. Sounds, smells, emotional states." "You left your coat," Liam continued matter-of-factly, as if discussing something that had happened yesterday rather than 6 years ago. "Mommy put it in the closet. It's still there. It has a missing button." Abby felt the blood drain from her face. The coat, Mark's expensive cashmere overcoat that he'd draped around her shoulders when he'd found her shivering that night. In her emotional state, she hadn't returned it, and eventually had hidden it away in the back of her closet, unable to either wear it or discard it. "A button," she echoed. "It was missing a button." Mark nodded slowly, the final piece clicking into place. "I lost it at my engagement party, the official announcement of my marriage to Cassidy." His eyes met Abby's, realization dawning. "The night before I came to your apartment. The night you chose your family legacy over your own child," Margot said, her voice hard with judgment. "Just like your father before you, and his father before him." The Millbrook County Courthouse stood like a weathered sentinel in the town square, its limestone facade glowing amber in the late afternoon sun. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding that never was. 3 weeks of headlines, speculation, and the gradual unraveling of the Donovan empire as Margot's evidence made its way through carefully selected channels to authorities who couldn't be bought. Inside courtroom C, the air hung heavy with tension and the faint scent of lemon polish. The wood-paneled walls had witnessed generations of justice and injustice in this small Missouri town, but perhaps nothing quite like the scene unfolding today. On one side sat Abby, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, Rachel a steady presence beside her. On the other, Mark Donovan sat alone, separated from the family attorneys, who had once represented his every interest. Between them, at a small table near the judge's bench, sat Liam. Though at the court-appointed guardian's suggestion, he wore his favorite Captain America t-shirt beneath a child-sized navy blazer, an outfit that somehow highlighted both his innocence and the gravity of the proceedings. His legs swung nervously, too short to reach the floor from the adult-sized chair. Judge Martha Kendrick, a woman whose silver hair and penetrating gaze had intimidated attorneys for over 3 decades, reviewed the documents before her with methodical care. The courtroom waited in silence, the only sound the occasional rustle of papers and the soft ticking of the ancient wall clock. "Before we proceed with the formal recognition of paternity," Judge Kendrick finally spoke, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hushed room, "I want to be clear about something." She removed her reading glasses, fixing Mark with a stare that had broken hardened criminals. "Mr. Donovan, this court is aware of the unusual circumstances surrounding this case. The evidence regarding your family's past behavior is deeply troubling, to put it mildly." Mark nodded, accepting the implicit rebuke without defense. "However," the judge continued, "those matters are being addressed in separate proceedings. Today, we are here solely to determine what is in the best interest of this child." Her gaze softened slightly as it moved to Liam, who was carefully folding a paper airplane from a notepad the guardian had given him. The courtroom doors opened, drawing all eyes to the back of the room. Eleanor Donovan stood in the entrance, elegant as always in a simple grey suit, her signature pearls conspicuously absent. Behind her, Daniel Donovan Sr. appeared, his once commanding presence diminished by recent events, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. Judge Kendrick's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. and Mrs. Donovan, I was informed you would not be attending these proceedings." "Plans change, Your Honor," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the tremor visible in her hands. "Some things are more important than pride." As the elder Donovans made their way to seats at the back of the courtroom, Abby noticed something startling. Eleanor was not wearing the black cord bracelet she'd been seen with at the hospital. Instead, around her wrist was a simple silver chain bearing a small heart-shaped locket. The proceedings continued with clinical efficiency. DNA results confirmed, legal documents signed, financial arrangements discussed. Through it all, Liam remained surprisingly composed, occasionally glancing between the adults with the watchful intelligence that had unwittingly started everything in the church 3 weeks earlier. When the time came to address custody arrangements, the judge called Liam to approach the bench. "Liam?" Judge Kendrick said gently. "I know this is confusing and probably a little scary, but I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" The boy nodded, standing straighter as if recognizing the importance of the moment. "Do you understand why you're here today?" Liam's answer was immediate and startlingly articulate for a 6-year-old. "Yes, ma'am. It's because Mr. Donovan is my dad, but he hasn't been my dad before, and now the court has to decide if he gets to be my dad for real." A murmur rippled through the courtroom at the child's clear understanding of the situation. Judge Kendrick's expression remained neutral, though a flicker of approval crossed her face. "That's right. And how do you feel about that?" Liam was quiet for a moment, considering the question with a seriousness that belied his years. "He saved me when I was sick," he finally said. The doctors said I was really sick, but he brought me to the hospital, and he stayed all night. Even when he thought I was sleeping, he didn't leave. Mark's breath caught audibly from his seat, his composed facade cracking for the first time. And he's the man from the night Mommy cried, Liam continued, his young voice gaining confidence. But now she doesn't cry anymore. He paused, glancing back at his mother. Well, she still cries sometimes, but it's different. She's not on the floor anymore. Abby felt tears burning behind her eyes, threatening to spill over despite her determination to remain strong. The simple observations of a child, cutting through years of adult complications to the heart of what mattered. He's trying, Liam added, turning back to the judge. Mummy says sometimes trying is the most important part, even if you mess up first. From the back of the courtroom came an unexpected sound, a soft sob, quickly stifled. Eleanor Donovan sat with her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming unchecked down her carefully made-up face. Judge Kendrick nodded, something softening in her stern demeanor. Thank you, Liam. You may return to your seat now. As the boy passed Mark on his way back to his table, he paused briefly. Then, in a gesture that seemed both impulsive and deliberate, he placed his small hand on Mark's arm. Not quite an embrace, but an acknowledgement, a beginning. The judge cleared her throat, regaining the room's attention. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court grants legal recognition of Mark Donovan as the biological father of Liam Harrison. She paused, her gaze moving between Mark and Abby. However, given the unusual circumstances of this case, I am ordering a graduated visitation schedule to be supervised initially by the court-appointed guardian. Full legal custody remains with Ms. Harrison, with Mr. Donovan granted visitation rights that may expand over time, contingent upon regular review by this court. She fixed Mark with a penetrating stare. Mr. Donovan, this court is giving you an opportunity that you did not earn. I suggest you use it wisely. Children need consistency, honesty, and presence. Not money, not status, not gifts, but a father who shows up even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. I understand, Your Honor, Mark replied, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. As the proceedings concluded and people began to file out, Daniel Donovan Sr. approached his son, his expression thunderous. You've destroyed everything, he hissed, too low for most to hear, but Abby caught the words from where she stood collecting Liam's things. The company, the family name, generations of legacy. All for what? Some child who— My child, Mark interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. My son, your grandson. He straightened to his full height, no longer the obedient heir, but a man who had finally found his own moral compass. And I won't let him grow up in the shadow of secrets like I did, like we all did. Daniel's face contorted with fury, but before he could respond, Eleanor stepped between them, her elegant composure restored despite the tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. It's over, Daniel, she said simply. The pattern ends here. From her purse, she withdrew a folded document, pressing it into her husband's hand. Divorce papers, I've already signed them. She turned to Mark, reaching up to touch his face gently. I should have been braver sooner. For you, for Catherine's daughter, for all of them. As Daniel Donovan stormed from the courtroom, a broken emperor without his empire, Eleanor approached Abby and Liam with tentative steps. I don't expect forgiveness, she said softly, but I hope in time you might allow me to know my grandson. From her wrist, she removed the silver bracelet with the heart locket, opening it to reveal a tiny photograph. This was your mother at 19. We were roommates in college before. Her voice faltered, before everything went wrong. Abby stared at the small image of her mother, young, carefree, beautiful, her arm linked with a younger Eleanor's, both women smiling broadly at the camera. A friendship she'd never known about, lost to the machinery of Donovan family politics and power. She would be so proud of you, Eleanor whispered, of the mother you've become, of the strength you've shown. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun bathed Millbrook in golden light. News vans lined the street, reporters poised with microphones and cameras to capture the outcome of a case that had captivated the nation. But for once, the constant hum of speculation and scandal seemed distant, unimportant compared to the quiet revolution that had occurred within those wood-paneled walls. Liam walked between Mark and Abby as they descended the courthouse steps, one small hand in each of theirs. Not yet a traditional family perhaps, but something new and fragile and full of possibility. Not a fairy tale ending, but a beginning carved from truth rather than lies. Behind them, Eleanor Donovan stood alone on the steps, watching as her son, his son, and the woman who had unwittingly broken the cycle walked away into the sunlight, free in ways the Donovan family hadn't been for generations. "Mommy?" Liam asked as they reached the bottom step. "Is he going to live with us now?" "No, sweetie," Abby answered honestly. "But he's going to be in your life. We're going to figure it out, day by day." Mark knelt down to Liam's level, his eyes, so like his son's, serious and sincere. "I can't undo the past 6 years," he said. "I can't be the father I should have been from the beginning, but I promise you this. From today forward, I will be there. For homework and baseball games and nightmares and everything in between. Not because a judge ordered it, but because you deserve it. Because you're my son, and that matters more than anything else ever will." Liam considered this with the straightforward logic of childhood. "Like when you stayed at the hospital, even though you were tired and your clothes got all wrinkly?" Mark smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face from the polished mask he'd worn for years to something real and imperfect and human. Exactly like that. Every time. As they walked toward the future, uncertain, unwritten, but honest at last, Liam's clear voice rose above the murmur of the waiting press corps, innocent and profound in its simplicity. Sometimes people have to get lost before they can find their way home. Some silences last for generations until a single voice, sometimes the smallest, finds the courage to speak the truth. Abby and Liam's journey reminds us that the secrets we bury don't disappear. They take root and grow until they break through the surface, often in ways we never anticipated. What would you have done in Abby's position? Would you have maintained your silence for the sake of peace, or would you have demanded recognition no matter the cost? For Mark, the choice between family legacy and personal integrity became the crucible that finally revealed his true character. How many of us have stood at similar crossroads, weighing the comfort of conformity against the painful freedom of honesty? Perhaps the most powerful lesson from their story is that redemption doesn't require perfection, only the willingness to take that first step toward what's right, even when it means walking away from everything you've ever known. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the secrets in your own family, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Follow this channel for more stories that explore the complex, beautiful, and sometimes painful connections that make us human. Like, comment, and subscribe to join a community of people who believe that every story, even the difficult ones, deserves to be told. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply tell the truth, even when our voice shakes.